You were on, sir. Thank you so much for your patience, everybody. Sorry about that.
No
Thanks,
worries,
Joe.
thank you. Like I said, Joe, we appreciate you, so thanks. All right, let's call the Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting for January 11th, 2021 to order. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz?
Counselor Garcia,
Present.
Counselor Abeta,
Here.
Counselor Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Vigil Coppler,
Here.
and Chairman Rivera.
I'm here as well.
We have a
Approval of the agenda. Any changes, Ms. Wheeler?
Changes from staff, Chairman.
All right, anything from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion for approval from Councilor Vigil Coppler, second from Councilor Garcia. Any further discussion? See none, can we have a roll call vote? Ms. Diaz?
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Abeta,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Vigil Coppler,
Yes.
and Chairman Rivera.
Yes. Next, approval of the consent agenda. Any changes, Ms. Wheeler?
No changes from staff, Chairman.
All right, anything the committee members would like to pull?
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Garcia.
I'd like to pull item G as in good.
Item G, Councilwoman Vigil Coppler.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to remove item B as in bad.
B, all right, B as in boy.
Bad.
Councilor Beta, anything?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Councilor Lindell?
Item E as in Edward, please.
E. All right. So with that, we have items G is in good, B is in boy, E is in Edward that have been pulled. Any further discussion?
Move to approve consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz?
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Abeta,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Vigil Coppler,
Yes.
and Chairman Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Ms. Diaz, I see some activity and under item A. Was that just done previously?
Yes, that was.
On Prime Gov,
Let
okay.
me get that cleared.
Next is approval of the minutes from December 14th. Any changes from staff, Ms. Wheeler?
No changes, Chairman.
Anything from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Move to
Move
Move
to
to approve the
approve.
minutes.
A motion for approval by Councilor Lindell. Councilor Garcia, is that okay if you second?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Second by Councilor Garcia. Any further discussion? We have a roll call vote, Ms. Diaz?
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Abeta,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Vigil Coppler,
Yes.
and Chairman Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we're on to public comment. Do we know between Joe and Ms. Diaz, how many people, Mr. Beta, Ms. Diaz, how many people we have lined up to speak?
I
I'm here
showed
too. Go ahead.
two
I'm sorry.
people.
I'm sorry, Jamie. Go ahead.
I showed two people that want to provide public comment.
Mr. Beta, you as well?
Yes, I see. Yes, two people.
All right, we'll give them, if there's only two people, we'll give them 2 minutes each, and then we'll continue on with our business.
Okay,
Okay, I'll go ahead and start it now. Miguel, you have 2 minutes to speak, starting now.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Rivera, councilors and members of Public Works and Utilities Committee. Wishing you all a Happy New Year as you move into 2021. And I just wanted to speak on item G regarding the substitute resolution regarding historical and cultural monuments and arts in the city of Santa Fe. Looking forward to being able to have public input from all sides of this difficult topic, and hoping that we all have a dialogue and a respectful and courteous dialogue, and that we understand that though history was difficult on all sides of those that settled and found or were originally in Santa Fe and New Mexico, that it is still our history that we learn from, and that we not act too hastily or too radically, as we've seen people do in our plaza as well as in our nation's capital. So looking forward to a discussion as this committee takes it up, as well as Finance Committee tomorrow and City Council on Wednesday. Again, thank you for your time, and look forward to this topic moving forward with the city's efforts through the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabaldon. Who's next, Mr. Beta or Ms. Diaz?
that would be, next up is Virgil. And I believe he needs to unmute himself. There you go.
Now, am I unmuted now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can hear you.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. It's going to be short today. First of all, I'd like to say that this resolution was really not necessary in the beginning because as the mayor mandated it to be, because the local Pueblos and the Hispanics have been living with each other for over 400 years. And we've been in peace with each other. Now we say reconciliation. Well, you know, we are in peace. We have been living with each other. The problem occurred when the mayor and Councilor Villarreal aligned themselves with the Red Nation and also with the Three Sisters. Now you have to understand that the Red Nation comes from the South Dakotas, those groups there. And the Three Sisters are basically from Arizona, the Nahos from Arizona, New Mexico, the Apaches, Utes. None of them are Pueblo Indians. And we're talking about Santa Fe and the north part where we deal with Pueblo Indians here, or natives. And those natives don't represent the Pueblos, and they have said that. They said that to the mayor when the mayor met with the eight Northern Pueblos, and they said that to him, and they said it to us when right after the mayor spoke to them. They said that no one speaks for them except the Pueblos themselves. Now you are being led by these two groups, maybe three groups, and this is not correct, and it's not right, and they should not be the leaders in this. You should allow the Pueblos to speak and not these other groups. Now the amendments that you have over here, there's many problems with it. You know, you're saying unaffiliated organization groups. Well, you're excluding a lot of people out of there. You're excluding the Pueblos themselves. You're excluding the Unión Protectiva, the Hispanic Roundtable, the Caballeros de Vargas. Those are groups that are organized, and you're saying unaffiliated groups. So that you're excluding all those voices from this, and that is not right. So there's a lot of problems that this issue has, and you know what? You're going to be creating more problems, Mr. Tiger, when you all, Councilor Tiger, when you look at the list of all the other items that the mayor wants to look at. You're creating havoc in the city, and we never had it until this year. Oh yes, there's been some disputes, but we never had the problems that we are having today.
Okay, his 2 minutes was up.
Virgil, can we have your name and address for the minutes, please? Is he still on?
Yeah, I think he muted himself there, Counselor.
How about now?
Oh, there you go.
Virgil J. Behid, 467 Camino Don Miguel, in the east side of town.
Thank you, Mr. Vigil. Is there
Counselor-
anyone else?
Jamie and I were talking, texting. We just want to check with John Dupuy just to make sure that he doesn't want to speak. We don't want to make any assumptions.
Please.
Okay. John, are you here to speak to the board? I mean, the committee?
I am only at the request or questions from the committee.
Okay, but not for public comment, correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. One last check. That was it.
That was it, Counselor.
Very good. Thank you. We're on to our action items. Item B, a request for approval of Buckman Direct Diversion Shared Pool Agreement with Santa Fe County. Councilor Vigil Koppler, you pull this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, first of all, I agree with the shared pool agreement, but I wanted to ask Dr. Roach, I think he's on here, so there you are. In your memo, I believe it is page 2, under advantages to city sharing the water resources, item 1, operational flexibility and discretionary BDD shutdown. I know we've mentioned this before in our BDD board meetings, but it crossed my mind that here when we say we may choose to reduce cost and cross-train operators, and we've talked about that at great length, but I wanted to ask if you, in working with Rick Carpenter, have, and I think mostly it would apply to the water side, the water treatment side, have you studied the union contract to ensure that the cross-training is allowable, and if there are any parameters under which the BDD and the city need to fall within?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Vigil Koppler, I have not familiarized myself with any details of the contract that would exclude us from being able to move staff from one facility to another. And I believe that the financial mechanisms are in place when and if BDD staff went to a city facility to charge that time completely to the city. Before that is done, I will make sure to check with members of the union to be sure there's nothing that I am not aware of that I should be.
Well, yes, and I certainly suggest without it, the financial impacts and the charging and stuff is a concern, yes, but it's not. I think, as we know, it's doable. But I believe before we get any further, I would encourage you and any supervisors involved in this arrangement to become familiar with the union contract front and back, page introduction all the way to the end, because we do seem to get in quite a bit of problem by not following the union contract, and it's very important. It's an agreement, and so I think to know this and follow it, I don't know that it would preclude you from accomplishing this goal, but we certainly need to fall within whatever the parameters are to implement it. So I thought I'd just hit that right now before anything goes further on that. Okay, that's it. That's the only reason I pulled this. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would move to approve.
Second.
A motion for approval in a second, and for discussion, Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on this, that it appears to me that this agreement is, and Mr. Roach, you can correct me if I'm wrong, It appears that this agreement is more advantageous to the county than it is to the city. However, in a spirit of cooperation and trying to secure the water future for both the city and the county, I think that we agreed to this and that we probably will pass this. Am I correct in that, Mr. Roach?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, I think that your characterization is fair. I would remind the committee that the shared pool is one of 3 areas where at a staff level, we're working with the county on water resources issues. And the 2 others are combined long-range planning effort and the San Juan Chama return flow pipeline. And so as part of a larger package, the shared pool fits into that.
I appreciate that. And I know that we'll need cooperation on the pipeline from the county. And that I think that this is a show of good faith from the city in bringing this forward and passing it. So those were my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell. I see a hand up. Again, Councilor Vihel Coppler, is this a new hand up?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, Dr. Roach, that on your memo on page 1, you mentioned the water resources and the co-owners of BDD, but I think it's important to mention that Las Campanas is also a partner, just for education purposes, you know, to round it all out. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Jesse, I do want to echo what Councilor Lindell said. In the spirit of cooperation, I'm sure this will go through, and I hope it's viewed by the county as being exactly that. And I hope we can continue, especially on water issues, to really work together and continue to maintain a good working agreement with the county on all issues regarding water and the BDD. So I hope that is expressed to all in the county and the county commission as well as the staff. With regards to what Councilwoman Vihel Coppler said, I think it would benefit both BDD and Canyon Road treatment facility to be able to cross-train and be able to move operators back and forth. So if the union contract doesn't allow it at the moment, I would suggest that we begin at some point, I'm not sure who the negotiating team is, but maybe looking at language that will allow us to do that, even if it's just on an emergency basis, so that employees can be utilized at either work site. I think that would be a good idea and a good practice, but I'll leave that up to you, Mr. Roach.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz?
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Abeta,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Vihel Coppler,
Yes.
Chairman Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on to item E, which is a request for approval of amendment number 3 in the amount of 500, I believe that should say 570,000 to original contract number 19-0031 for on-call construction with GM Emulsion LLC. Councilwoman Lindell, you pull this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get to that item. On page 1 in the memo, I'm just trying to clarify. It's a request for approval of Amendment 3 in the amount of 570,000. But I don't think that that's correct. I think the actual request is for 184,344. Am I correct on that, or am I reading this improperly?
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Lindell, the amendment is for 570,000 over the next 3 fiscal years, which is 2021, 21, 22, and 22, 23. This year's amount is 184,000 for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Is that Mr. Lopez speaking?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. If you're going to speak, if you could identify yourself before, because we have a number of people on and it's hard for me to tell who's speaking. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Councilor Lindell.
Okay. Is this how we typically ask for 3 years worth on an amendment like this? What's the term of the contract right now?
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Lindell, that I am not sure exactly what the terms are on that contract.
Okay, what I'm seeing is through 2021 for on-call, we had Amendment 1 increasing for Water Division 30,000, and then Amendment 2 that extended the term through January of 23. I just want to be clear how long we're extending this contract for. I do see that it's through 22, 23. Is that how we want to do this? Extending these contracts just by amendment?
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Lindell, from what I understand is they're 4-year contracts.
Okay. I just think we should try to be a little bit clearer on these things. Additionally, and I always say this, and I would hope that we have a way of tracking it at this point in time, but I think that these patches and repairs that are completed, I think we need to be very, very careful in tracking these and making sure that we check them before the warranty guarantee on them is up. I see lots of places that are patched that a year later, they're a big sinkhole, not a sinkhole, but certainly the pavement has sunk. And, you know, we end up getting seemingly these contribute to potholes and rough roadways. So I'd like to be assured that we keep track of what patches and pavement repairs GM Emulsion completes, and that we do a check on these prior to them going out of warranty. Do we have a program for that now?
Program for that, but I can get one going, and I can always go back on my invoices and
Well, I really appreciate that, Mr. Lopez, because I think that I've talked about this before numerous times, and I've asked for a program. It seems like I don't want to diminish the amount of work that it is, but it seems like we could have some kind of a spreadsheet that would tell when these repairs are made, where they're made, and a date of warranty expiration on them, and that we could do some kind of a checkup on them, say 30 days before that warranty is over. Because certainly up and down Palace Avenue, we've had an awful lot of repairs in the past. And you guys repaved that road and did a terrific job. It's wonderful. But even in the time since it's been repaired, we've had people have to make cuts into it, and the asphalt's repaired. And those can potentially end up being problematic for us. And I think that if these have a warranty, we should make sure that we're getting the lifetime from this work that is contractually agreed upon.
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Lindell, yes, I can do a spreadsheet on that, and on as far as the water division, the cuts that we take care of, that's no problem.
I really appreciate that very, very much. It saves all of us work in the long run. I'm sure it's a fair amount of work to set that up, but once it's set up, Randy, I think it'll serve all of us well. And I thank you for being willing to do that.
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Lindell, thank you.
You guys do a great job, and I know it's one more thing, but over time it'll make things better for all of us. So with that, Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
A motion for approval by Councilor Lindell, second by Councilor Vihel Coppler. Councilor Vihel Coppler, you have your hand up for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about, well, first of all, this asphalt and paving is that to repair where you've dug for water lines and such?
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Vihel Coppler, yes, it is. It's for emergency repairs. We have water main breaks or service main breaks, and we don't have the large equipment to do that size of asphalt cuts, the
Right.
large size.
Okay, and then the other question I have, I just want to make sure I understand the BAR correctly. Are you asking for taking money from maintenance, grounds and roads of $184,344 because that's what you're short in that line item to make up the $570,000? Is that what that description is about?
The 184,000 comes from the Water Division Enterprise Cash Fund, and
Okay.
it goes into that line item of the roads and maintenance where we're short.
Okay, so that's the amount you're wanting to transfer to make whole the 570.
Mr. Chair, Madam Councilor Vihel Coppler, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I do have a question, one question, Mr. Lopez. So this contract is for cutting into the asphalt when the city does work, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, this is for emergency repairs. So if we have a water main break, and say we had a water main break on Zia Road, and that one was 200 feet by 400 feet, that's when we call GM and they come in and make the asphalt repair after we've already made the water repair.
Yeah, I just realized recently that if a private plumber cuts into the asphalt, then they're responsible for replacing it. That's correct, right?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
And does anybody inspect that? Does anybody know who they're using or look at the work that their contractors are actually doing on those roadways?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Regina Wheeler, Public Works Director, and those the privates have to get a road cut permit through Public Works, and then we do follow up and check on the quality of that patch over time.
All right, so that may be included in what Councilor Lindell is talking about, so that we can keep track of really what companies are doing a good job and which ones we really have problems with a year, 6 months, a year and a half down the road. I think that's what we're looking at. So not only the people we contract with, but people that private plumbers are probably working with as well.
Yes, Chairman, based on Councilor Lindell's feedback and our experience in Sierra del Norte and other places, we instituted this program about a year and a half ago and keep track and follow up and check the quality of the patches by the privates.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? See none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz?
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Abeta,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Vigil Coppler,
Yes,
and Chairman Rivera.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Next, we're on to item E. I'm sorry, item G, which is consideration of resolution number 20-21, hosting community conversations and establishing a special city committee on Santa Fe's cultures, histories, art, reconciliation, and truth. I know the mayor's on, as well as Councilwoman Romero Worth. Mayor, is there anything you'd like to say before we take any action on this? Not sure if the mayor is around. Councilor Romero Worth, anything before we start?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just here in case there are questions, and I'm available to answer as needed. Thank you.
Very good. Other councilors may have questions as we go, and I'll be sure to touch base with everyone as we get through this. So, Councilor Garcia, you pull this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do thank the sponsors for bringing forth this substitute resolution in the sense that it, in my opinion, gets us back to what the focus should be at hand in regards to actively engaging community dialogue. I know that the prior resolution, we kind of got our wheels stuck in the mud, so to speak, on developing what a committee would look like. And I know that the intention of the substitute resolution would, it has been said by my colleagues that it would get us away from that process. But unfortunately, I don't believe that's 100% the case. Mr. Chair, please bear with me because this is our only opportunity that I have to ask questions before it goes to governing body on Wednesday, and I do have a great number of questions. So with that being said, I have introduced a simple language insertion amendment. If anybody has questions in regards to that, I'm more than happy to answer that, but I'm not going to necessarily spend time focusing on that tonight. So with that, let's get her going. First question I have is this resolution indicates that there's going to be a project team. So who do we have the staff identified who are going to be part of this project team, the city project team? And I guess that's probably a question for the sponsors.
Councilwoman Romero Worth or Mayor Weber, do you want to take the first stab at that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution contemplates that the, sorry, I'm just looking for it. Community Engagement Department and the Arts and Culture Department will be the lead groups. And that I believe, and I think we need the mayor to confirm, that the staff, the project team will be made up of folks in those two departments.
And just for clarification, solely staff from those two departments.
So, Counselor, Mr. Chair, Counselor Garcia, we are modeling this project after the Albuquerque process. And they had an internal project team assigned to their cultural services department. And they also have an Office of Equity and Inclusion. And I think similarly, this is kind of the parallels, I guess. We don't have those kinds of things here. And so we would pull staff from the two departments I mentioned, and I don't know why we would need to go out to other departments. Because I think those are the two that are most aligned with what we need here, which is a public engagement process and, heavily influenced or heavily embedded in arts and culture.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, Counselor. I would ask that if we do want to engage any staff from either any departments outside of the two listed, that we at least bring it to the council's attention, because I think I don't want us to get into a situation where staff from other departments be brought into the process and it's not brought to the governing body's attention. So next question I have is in regards to outcomes and objectives. So in page 2 in the line 1, in the first, I think it's the first bit where they're resolved, we talk about outcomes and objectives. Is there any reason why we haven't determined what that is before we agree to this? Because I'd hate for us to get into a situation where the outcomes and objectives aren't necessarily what maybe the governing body had thought they might be. So my question is, why haven't we included the outcomes and objectives in the resolution?
So Councillor, is one of the sponsors, I'll take that one on. And really, as a community-led discussion, we don't want to predetermine our own biases, our own thoughts, our own ideas of what should come out of this. We want the committee, or I'm sorry, the community to be able to decide for themselves through this discussion, through mediation and other help, really what those outcomes and objectives are. The more we're involved, the more it appears, which is what you were trying to avoid in the first resolution, is us having a predetermined outcome. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So I think as much as possible to allow the community to come up with their own ideas, outcomes, objectives about how this turns out is frankly one of the reasons that I'm sponsoring this. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It kind of does, but it doesn't, because I believe we do need to set at least some objectives. We don't necessarily need to determine outcomes, but we need to set some objectives in the sense that the community is going to be asking, well, what is the overall outcome going to be? Are they going to be focusing on monuments and statues? Or is it going to go broader beyond that? I think the immediate call from the community is to focus on monuments and statues and have some resolution to that. So I think at minimum, that should be one of the objectives, is to really provide some guidance to the governing body in regards to what the future of monuments and statues look like in the city of Santa Fe. We're not necessarily looking for, we're not necessarily telling them we want the outcome. We're saying we want you to provide input on this particular subject.
Councilor Garcia, I think we just want to open dialogue, and if that's part of the discussion, then that's part of the discussion. If it's more about history, if it's stories about how you grew up and what the plaza means to you, if you want to talk about monument, it's all open. And for us to, I think, set those outcomes or objectives then really defeats the purpose of listening to the community. It makes it appear as though we're framing the road or the pathway that we want these discussions to go, and I'm not sure that's what we want to do.
I understand the perspective, Mr. Chair, but I think in some sense we need to, because what happens in the instance where this resolution should be enacted and we hit the end of the year and there is no potential recommendation in regards to what happens with the obelisk or any of the statues and monuments throughout the city. I think ultimately that is going to lead to more frustration. And I think that it's incumbent of us to at least give some direction to the community. We're not trying to put words in their mouth. I think by keeping it open-ended in regards to, as part of the facilitation process that's proposed here, have one of the topics be, monuments and statues. What do they mean to you? What do you not like about them, etc. I think it's critical that we collect that information, because what we've seen over these past 6 months with the beginning of the call for the removal of the obelisk and the Vargas statue and the Kit Carson Memorial, we saw further actions in regards to removing the name of certain buildings. I've saw removing the name of street names. And I think we want to, in some sense, provide some clarity for the community. And without that, we're not confronting the issue at hand. I think you've got community members who are extremely frustrated on all sides. And by not necessarily giving some direction in regards to how we want to address this, we as a governing body are not willing to take a stand and say, look, we want to address this, provide some context and information to us. That way we, the governing body, can make a decision. Because at the end of the day, whatever recommendations the community puts forth, that's fantastic, but we will, as the governing body, will be charged with making decisions. And I think as a person who has the responsibility of making an informed decision, I want data and information to be collected on that subject. And I don't want us to leave it open and hope that it gets brought up. I'm sure it will, but I think we need to provide that direction. So with that, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and move on to the next question.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, can I point you to some language in the resolution that might alleviate some of your concern?
Sure.
So on page 2, on lines, 9 through 12, it talks about the community dialogue sessions. And I think what's being contemplated in the language that you cite in terms of achieving desired outcomes and objectives, the idea would be the outcomes and objectives of this resolution, which I think to Councilor Rivera's first answer was, we want this to be an open process. We don't know where it leads. we want the community to provide that direction. But to be clear, what we're talking about here is in lines 9 through 12, where it says, be it further resolved that the community dialogue sessions will be designed to promote broader cross-cultural understanding, racial equity, healing, and reconciliation, and to inform decisions for statutes and monuments, as well as short, medium, and long-term responses for community healing and reconciliation. So I think those are the things that we're looking for direction on from the community. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate the clarification. So my next question is, who is going to determine who the hired facilitator is? Which individual will be charged with making that decision? Will the governing body have an input in that? Is it going to be one person making that decision? Who is going to be ultimately the person that chooses and decides that individual or individuals or organization, whatever it may be?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to take a stab at that?
Sure, go ahead, Counselor.
And Mayor, if you want to jump in, I don't want to step on toes. I think that's where the city project team comes in. They would be the ones. We do have some recommendations of people in Santa Fe that are known to some of the folks who have done this process in Albuquerque with similar backgrounds and skill sets to facilitate the process that we're imagining here. So I think it's the city project team that would be going out to figure out, what kind of person we're looking for and who might align with that.
Okay, so the city project team, I think you ultimately said the city project team will determine who that is based off of an RFP, just a process, letters expressed interest. I mean, because I know that we, the folks that led the city of Albuquerque team process are fine and experienced and qualified facilitators. But I know that we've got lots of fine and experienced facilitators in our community. And so I didn't know if we were going to open it up to whomever felt that they can help with this process. Because I do ultimately see this potentially kind of as a all hands on deck process. We want to ensure that if an individual or organization feels like they can be a value add to this process, we can figure out how we might involve them in this process. So I would just encourage that we not lose sight. And I know that, and like I said, the folks from the city that led the city of Albuquerque's process were highly qualified, but we want to also see if there's also other individuals in the community. So next question is in the whereas on page 2, line 6, it talks about the convening of community dialogue sessions. And the way a sponsor kind of explained it to me was that organizations would sign up, individuals would sign up to participate in these processes, and they would go through a facilitated process, these 3 steps that are later kind of itemized further on in the resolution. I do have some concerns with that because I feel it would lead us to having siloed experiences in the sense that I want the community to be able to understand and learn from each other. If we have an organization that is solely made up of one group of folks with one particular background, it's going to become an echo chamber. And ultimately, this process needs to ensure that we're hearing everybody's perspectives. And so with that being said, how can we ensure that, we're not going to have Organization A, a group of members from Organization A sign up, and it's facilitated process solely with Organization A. Organization B does the same, Organization C, D, F, G, and they're all siloed. I think it needs to be cross mixed and a very organic mixture. And we need to ensure that that happens. And my question is, how can we ensure that that happens with this process? Because I think one of the challenges that was seen with the city of Albuquerque's process was that there was not diverse response. They felt it wasn't diverse enough. And I want to ensure that whatever happens, we don't run into that challenge. And so with that being said, how can we ensure that? How are the sponsors open? I mean, I want to, if it means
Mr.
putting
Chair,
forth
I
the-
can answer this question,
Go ahead,
and I
Councilor.
understand it, Counselor.
Go ahead, Councilor Romero Worth.
So we also, so again, we are emulating the process that was created in Albuquerque. We have met several times with the city project team and the facilitators who led the Albuquerque process, and this question did come up. And I think we are the beneficiaries of the fact that they've already implemented the process they created. And they did it in a very short period of time. They created it and they implemented it, and they brought recommendations forward to their city council in 4 months. Hindsight being 2020, they wish they had had more time. But to get back to your question, Counselor, the way that they addressed this issue is they had conveners. They had people who went out and looked for organizations and people to participate. And what happened is there are 3 sessions. So let's say you're a member of an organization. Let's say you're part of the Historic Santa Fe Foundation, and you have a group of people who want to participate in these community dialogues. And you think that they, for whatever reason, they are the folks who are going to represent your group. You can enter these dialogue sessions through that group. And so the first group would probably just be members of your organization. What they did in Albuquerque to address the concerns that you are bringing up is they then, in the second and third dialogue sessions, mixed people between the organizations so that they weren't siloed, so that they got exactly what you're talking about, which is this cross-cultural understanding and hearing other perspectives. And these are all facilitated, but you come in the door sort of in a safe space is what I would call it, and until you get, and you have that opportunity to get used to what this process is going to be about. You buy into it because you found the conversation had value, and then you continue on in the second and third rounds. But in those rounds, you wouldn't necessarily be only with the people of your own organization. In addition, the resolution contemplates 2 public sessions for members of the general public unaffiliated with any organization to participate. Now, there may be such demand for this that there are more than 2 sessions, but there should be at least 2 sessions, I think what one of our staff people called cohorts, when you consider that there are 3 dialogue sessions within a cohort. And so, again, you can come in through any organization that you're affiliated with that wants to participate. We will want our staff to help. We will want the facilitators to help. Well, actually, I don't know. It's the facilitators. We need to check with how they did. I think it was the city project team that really went out and helped find all the people that they could to make sure there was a cross section of voices being represented. But then if you aren't affiliated, you would participate through one of the 2 sessions created just for general members of the public who might not be affiliated with any organization. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman, but unfortunately it doesn't, because I believe the point I was trying to make is the information drawn from round one, which is focusing on personal identity and stories. It's critical, and I will repeat, it's critical that our community members understand each other's personal identity and stories. That shouldn't happen in round two. That should happen in round one with a diverse mixed group of folks. Because if you allow for one homogeneous group, you're going to get a homogeneous background. Everybody, for example, to use your example, the Santa Fe Historic Society, you're going to get that perspective, and you're not going to get a different perspective. You need to understand from the get-go that there's different perspectives in our community and learn from the beginning and then start to build off of that. So with that, I'd be working on this, and I guess I'll have to introduce an amendment to address that.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, if I can.
Councilor Romero Worth.
Sure.
If I can again point you to some of the language in the resolution that might be helpful to alleviate your concerns. I would look at page 2, lines 17 through 22 that outline the community dialogue sessions. It says the community dialogue sessions will consist of 3 sessions as follows. Round 1 will
Councilwoman, I'm familiar with that, and I have lots of questions.
If I might,
so I do
Mr.
want to
Chair,
respect
I'd
my
like
others'
to.
time.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to say this just for the benefit of the public.
Go ahead, Councilor Romero Worth.
Round 1 will focus on personal identity and stories. Round 2 will focus on shared dialogue and cross dialogue about core values, building on round 1. And round 3 will focus on generating solutions, recommendations, and responses. I completely agree, Councilor Garcia. What you're saying is we don't want echo chambers. We want cross-cultural understanding. It's part of the value of this process. I completely agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Garcia, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's get into the survey. There's a community survey proposed in there. Who's developing the survey? What questions are going to be asked? Are governing body members going to be allowed to help with the development of this survey?
Mr. Chair, I can take a stab at that answer.
Councilor Romero Worth.
So again, I would believe that the city project team and the facilitators would come up with a survey. I would again, I think it's a good question. I think we would continue to seek guidance from the people in Albuquerque who did this work to learn from the things that they felt went well about their survey and how they developed it and what things maybe didn't go as well and what we can learn from their mistakes. I would point you to some information. We've continued to interact with the Albuquerque team, and to one of our responses about one of the questions raised about the participation of elected officials in any of the roundtable meetings, or I think really our interaction with this process. I think what we really need to do is trust this process, trust our city project team and the facilitators we hire to do the work that's necessary and not interfere as elected officials in this work. Because again, we don't want to have what I would call a chilling effect on it. We want it to be an open process where people, and these are very hard conversations about race and culture, especially when you're speaking about your own background and the importance of your own stories and your own values. I think we want to get out of the way and allow these conversations to happen and not hinder them in any way, because again, they are very difficult and people need the space to feel safe and to really open up. So I would suggest that we step back and trust this process, trust our staff, and let the work be done by some of the folks who are actually trained in these areas.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Thank you for the clarification, Councilwoman Romero Worth. But what happens in the instance when a survey is brought forth to us and we have questions that could have been answered through the survey? I think we have some colleagues on the council that could, at least at minimum, and I'm not saying drive the survey, but at least look at it, see what might help to draw information, and to completely disregard some of the expertise and experience that the governing body has. I think it's you're not utilizing the tools in the tool belt, so to speak. So with that, I think we need to definitely not think of us handing off the keys to this planning team, so to speak, because what happened, and you know what happened with the city of Albuquerque's process, that is what happened. And when the keys came back to the council said, sorry, the process wasn't done the way we would have liked, and we are now going to take the keys over. And so with that, it doesn't have to be a and or, I think it can be both. And I don't think that governing body members would get in and over involve themselves in the process. I think where it might be necessary, if they can be engaged, I would highly encourage that we allow for that to happen.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor, go ahead.
Councilor Garcia, first, I would disagree with your characterization of what happened in Albuquerque. I think that's counterfactual. I think what happened was, as described by Councilor Romero Worth, the governing council of Albuquerque didn't say they wanted to take over, as you put it, the keys. What they said was, go back and get more input. They felt that the process had not been given enough time to generate the kinds of input, the scale of input, the diversity of input that would make them comfortable with what is ultimately going to be a very difficult, challenging political vote. So your mischaracterization, I can't allow to stand. Secondly, I think what we're talking about here is a philosophical disagreement. And those are always the most challenging to untangle. I think the philosophical position that Councilor Rivera articulated earlier in this meeting is one that I share, which is the overall criticism of our first effort to design an approach to community engagement and healing was fundamentally a top-down approach. And it ran the risk, as pointed out by you, among others, that we would have optics, at least, that left people feeling that the city council, the mayor, had prejudged and predictated outcomes rather than trusting the people, rather than trusting democracy, rather than trusting open and honest dialogue. The more the city council and or the mayor insist on micromanaging or getting involved in reviewing and producing and vetting materials that would go out to the public or engaging in editing that material, I think the more we risk tampering with what ought to be a hands-off exercise in grassroots democracy. And frankly, you've been one of the most articulate members of this governing body when it comes to expressing that exact ideal under when we've had other issues in front of us. So to me, this is one of those situations where it's up to us as elected officials to trust the people, to accept the conversations that people have with each other, to encourage candor, and not to assume that we have control over the public process, but rather to let it happen and then engage with the results when we are handed the opportunity to review the work of the people of the city of Santa Fe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that clarification, but I respectfully disagree in the sense that when let's hypothetically say, and I'll put it in context, maybe that might be more relatable to you. When a big business, a corporation, is trying to draw information from their employees, a survey is put together. And the survey ultimately is put together at the request of those who are requesting the survey to be put together, because there are certain pieces of information that want to be collected, and they want to ensure that that information is collected. And so with that being said, I don't understand, and I'm not trying to say we need to drive the process. The point I'm trying to make is, we ultimately, at the end of the day, will be charged with the responsibility of making the decision of what the future lies in front of us. The community is going to provide their input, which is going to be invaluable to be making that decision. But we want to ensure that we're collecting the appropriate information. So we're not trying to form ideas of folks. What we're trying to do is draw information based off of the criteria we're going to be needing to make these decisions. So with that, I don't think it's would be muddying the water, dirtying the water, or making the data incorrect. Should, whether it be the governing body or even yourself or somebody, take a final look before the city planning team says, hey, look, this is the information, this is the survey that's going to go out. Because I think it's incumbent of us to ensure that we know what is going to be collected, because there might be critical information missed. We got to be real with ourselves. This city planning team that's going to be tabbed with overseeing this, some might have experience in the matter, but I would venture that most don't. And we want to ensure that we're not putting all of that responsibility on them, and we as a team work together to ensure that we are providing the necessary tools to the community that will result in a positive outcome for us. So with that, I would just ask us as a body to be open-minded, not trying to have us lead the process, so to speak, but have us as a governing body work together to provide tools to the community. That way, once this process wraps up, it's as successful as possible. But thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. My next question focuses on, and this is, let's see, where is it? Page 3, line 8, and this talks about the individual surveys. In particular, and I agree, if we can accommodate one-on-one conversations, awesome. Because in the day and age where COVID is and we want to ensure people are safe, let's ensure that we can do that. The part of this, be it further resolved, I don't agree with is the last sentence, where there will be more in-depth questions asked. To me, you can potentially get skewed information and data. And so with that, I'll be introducing an amendment to strike that. We need to have a fair process. And if those who are participating in a one-on-one process are getting more information drawn from them, I don't believe that's a fair and would lead to quality, clean data. So with that, I don't agree with that. So let's get into what I brought about at the beginning in regards to, you know, the topic of this resolution was brought forth because we were getting stuck in regards to developing what a community committee would look like. And so when we get into the be it further resolved, where it talks about the community table, that in some essence is a committee. We need to determine what that body looks like, what the demographics look like, how many folks are going to be able to participate, similar to what we were talking about with the overall committee breakdown with the original resolution, because what we want to ensure is that it is a fair and equitable process. So with that, what parameters are set for this community table, or this community solutions table? What parameters are we proposing? What is it? Is it going to say everybody that went through steps 1 through 3 is going to participate, which could be potentially thousands of people? Or are we going to say, you know, the first 100? What, I don't know. Ultimately, I guess that's the question. What does that makeup of the community solutions table look like?
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Romero Worth,
I can take a stab at an answer.
please.
Councilor Garcia, I'm looking. If you look at page 3, lines 10 through 13, be it further resolved that the community solutions table be established to include representatives who have participated in all 3 community dialogue sessions. The community solutions table shall suggest solutions based on a combination of recommendations for session participants at the end of each community dialogue session. In Albuquerque, the community solutions table was about 50 people. Now, again, they had 4 months to create this process and to implement it. The city council there asked, some of them commented that they needed more community participation because of the pandemic. They didn't think they had gotten enough folks to participate and make it through the 3 community dialogue sessions in order to be at the community solutions table. But part of this, this process, I think, is created so that by the time you finish the 3 community dialogue sessions, which are facilitated, you hopefully have come to a broader understanding and some cross-cultural understanding that puts you in a very good position to sit at the community solutions table and have a wider perspective and be willing to hear people who maybe aren't like you or come from different places or have different stories, even though you have shared values. And that, again, the Albuquerque table had 50 people. Now, there's been some concern, and I agree that we need to make sure that we have, and the resolution calls for diverse representation on the community solutions table. So when we get to that point, I think we need to make sure that the folks that have gotten through the 3 dialogue sessions and have the ability to sit at the solutions table do represent a cross section of the community. And that will be important for us to make sure that we're convening a broad section of organizations so that we end up with a broad section of voices at the community solutions table. And that's going to take time and some effort. And we want to make sure that we have enough time given to the process. Now, if you can't be at the community solutions table, that doesn't mean that your voice won't be heard. One, the facilitators will be documenting what they hear at the community dialogue sessions. All of that is fair game for the community solutions table to look at. It's also why we have called out interviews and a survey so that people who maybe can't do the 3 sessions and sit at the community solutions table still have the ability to give their input for consideration. And all of that will be compiled for our consideration when this comes back around. So I think what we're trying to do with the variety of ways that we're reaching out to people is make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. But also, we are trying to capture the stories of our community, the stories of the individuals and their histories and their cultures and what makes this such a special place. And all of that can be used going forward to contextualize the things that come after this process and anything that we decide to do moving forward. I think all of this will become part of our history, and that's why we want to make sure that we have a variety of ways for people to participate. And to go back to your earlier point, why the interviews are so important. So again, we're casting a broad net. We're using lots of different means to get as much community input as possible on this very difficult subject of culture and race, and how we reconcile and heal as a community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Councilwoman. But from what I heard is that we don't have any systems in place to ensure that, besides what's laid out here in the resolution, saying that it's going to have a makeup of the demographics of the city, but we're going to allow, if 1,000 people go through steps 3, we're going to have potentially 1,000 people on this community solutions table. I think we strongly need to think that. And ultimately, I think, the question is, if we're drawing information as part of step 3 in this process, which is, step 3 is to focus on generating solutions, recommendations, and responses, why couldn't the community solutions table be retabbed as the governing body? We ultimately are going to have to make this decision. I've been told countless times by constituents that, I elected you, you make the decisions, we trust you. And with that being said, this community solutions table just gets back to the original challenge that we were having with the prior resolution of ensuring that a proper makeup is given. It just adds to muddying the water. And if through steps 1 through 3, and we can collect the data information on how to, they're recommending on how to move forward, then why not have the community solutions table be the governing body?
Mr. Chair, I can try that answer.
Councilor Merrill-Worth.
I think, Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, the community solutions table is not a decision-making body. They are merely compiling, sifting through all the things that we hear, all the information that we gather from the community, and to the best of their ability, making recommendations. We are ultimately the decision about what to do with monuments or how to move forward largely still and will remain with the governing body. All we're doing here is creating a process where we can get to know each other better and maybe better understand each other.
Thank you, Councilwoman. But I strongly believe, why not put that duty on the governing body? Why not have each governing body member have to sift through the results? That way we can make informed decisions. I strongly believe that we need to ensure that no stone is left unturned, and, including ourselves in the process in some sense it's part of the process. Let's get that elephant out of the room, and because at the end of the day, we're going to be charged with making decisions on whatever recommendations are had. And so with that, why not have us involved in that process of sifting through that information, hearing from community members? I think it's incumbent of us, not only as elected officials, but as individuals. I think it helps us make informed decisions and can help us grow as individuals. So with that, I will have more questions probably for governing body in regards to this particular whereas, but I wanted to kind of get a feel of why that body, because it ultimately gets us back to muddying the water, and we want to ensure that whatever process is laid out in front of us is as crystal clear as possible.
Counselor, I assume since you didn't agree with the answers that an amendment will be in our future.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Romero Worth.
Can I just read to you a short segment from the Albuquerque experience on this question?
Sure.
So when this question was asked of the folks in Albuquerque about their experience, the response came back, "We chose not to have elected officials or high-level city leadership in the dialogue. The community dialogue is meant to bring community members into productive dialogue with each other, to consider difficult issues related to history, identity, belonging, values, representation, historical trauma, and work together to generate solutions and recommendations on how to go forward. This is a community-centered dialogue. As soon as elected officials, city leadership are part of any dialogue, the dynamic will naturally shift because they are the ultimate decision makers. Either participants will focus on convincing the decision makers of their perspective, or it will later be assumed that the decision makers significantly shaped the outcomes. If the community recommendations will be presented to city leadership and the city council for a final decision, then a little space seems best." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to that, I believe that their response was solely in regards to steps 1, 2, and 3, and not a community solutions table, because ultimately, I agree with that. We should not participate in steps 1, 2, or 3. But step 4, the community solutions table, why? I don't see the challenge there. And further clarification from our colleague with the city of Albuquerque could be requested, because I strongly believe they're referring it to steps 1, 2, and 3, not the community solutions table as you, I think, falsely represented.
Mr. Chair,
Mayor.
couple thoughts. Councillor Garcia started this round of questioning by saying that a community solutions step that involves the voice of the people only takes us back into the challenge we had with picking who would be on a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think the exact opposite is true. That is, again, a misrepresentation of the process. The problem that we got into with the commission idea, as represented by both Councillor Garcia, who wanted a commission to select a commission, or Councillor Vigil Koppler, who wanted each member of the governing body to select a person, that got us into the challenge of the direct engagement of each of us in some fashion with deciding who would be participating. The idea at the heart of the process that Albuquerque created, and I think we should give them credit, this was their own public participation invention and process that they developed, vetted, and ultimately took to the people, is really an exercise in democracy. People are invited to participate, not selected by the governing body, the city council, or the mayor. It is self-selecting to the extent that we, as individuals, want to encourage broad and deep and open participation. Each of us can reach out to specific parts of our city and encourage more people to engage in the process. Councillor Abeyta has, for example, always maintained, and I think this comes from his background with the Boys and Girls Club, that we need young people to participate. We need to make sure there's intergenerational representation, as opposed to having it be older residents of Santa Fe. So it takes what we had earlier proposed and turns it upside down. It makes it a bottoms-up, open-ended, grassroots democratic process. The reason to allow that process to culminate in a series of recommendations is, to me, self-evident. We want people to be able to take the work they invested their time and energy in and bring it to a culmination where the recommendations are forthcoming from the people of Santa Fe. The recommendations are impossible for any of us to predict. They may take us in areas that none of us could anticipate. I hope it will be the kind of recommendation where we are genuinely dazzled by the creativity and democratic minds of people in Santa Fe who can generate ideas that we would never have come up with among ourselves. Once we've had the benefit of that culmination of their work, Councilor Garcia is right. We have every opportunity as those recommendations make their way to us to go back and review all of the raw material, all of the documentation, to revisit the dialogues that produce those recommendations, and to add our own recommendations should we so choose. But I think it would short circuit a process that really does lead to that kind of community problem solving where the voice of the people has a chance to result in a specific set of pieces of advice, recommendations, guidelines that they would offer to us. And then we, as the decision makers, per Councilor Garcia's point, we are in a position to review the material that led to those guidelines.
Since 4:30. Mr. Chair, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, were you done? Okay, go ahead, Councilor Garcia.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree. I think, we ultimately want to involve and spark a process where we draw so much information, we are running and excited. But the challenge I see, and I guess that it gets to the heart of my first question is, how are we going to set systems in place to ensure that we ensure that the demographics are met? Because I do see this as a process where the deck can be stacked and certain populaces or demographics or age groups or genders or whatever it may be might go through all three processes, and that's all that goes through for one reason or another, because whether it's the pandemic has impacted their participation, some individuals just don't want to participate in the process, whatever it may be. And I guess to the heart of my concern is that how do we ensure that we hold true to whatever this community table looks, the makeup is truly a makeup of not only the city of Santa Fe, but our surrounding communities. And I just want to, I think that's the critical component of that. And that's why I said, well, if we're going to put too much onus on that, why not just put the onus on us as a governing body? Because at the end of the day, we're going to be charged with making the decision. And as I mentioned, as one of the constituents has told me time and time again, we elected you to make these decisions. Stop coming to me. You know how we feel, and make the decision. And I think steps 1, 2, and 3 does great work by collecting data and information. And then the next step, and I'm not saying it has to be this, but I'm throwing out that proposal. Why couldn't it be us that have to do the homework based off of the information provided by the public and make that decision? I'm just throwing it out there. And Mr. Mayor, I do want to make one kind of clarification, because I do feel it's been slighted time and time again by colleagues in regards to the comment of a committee to make up of a committee. Let me remind you that your amendment prior to mine was a committee to select a committee. Yours was a committee of the chairs of committees to select this body, or the body in the prior. Mine was an autonomous committee. So I think it kept, and I'm not going to stand for folks keep trying to degrade me by saying a committee to select a committee. My committee was autonomous. My committee was not going to be elected officials making decisions. So with that, I wanted to make that clarification. My last question is, In regards to page 4, line 12, talks about the members of the governing body should have the opportunity to participate in diversity and inclusion training, either individually or in small groups. And so my question is, why is it only the governing body? I would highly recommend we make it a requirement for anybody that's on the city planning team to have to go through this training. If we have city staff that are going to be charged, that are going to be the team, they have to, we make it mandatory that they go through this diversity training. So I'll be introducing an amendment to that. My question is, why should we only limit it to city staff or governing body members? I think it's something we as a governing body should promote within our community is diversity training. It will help us. It'll help us grow as a community. And I don't know how, because that's costly, I don't know how we can make that happen, but I think we need to start thinking that. I want to plant the seed with us as a governing body that we begin to think of how can we provide tools to the community to better engage and interact and grow together. And so with that, I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chair. I thank you, and I apologize to my colleagues on the committee for taking up so much time, but this is the only opportunity I have before governing body. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. I look forward to your amendments. I will say I see a couple hands up, and Mr. Virgil is one of them. And we don't take questions at this time, Mr. Vigil. This is the time for the governing body to deliberate, ask questions, as you just saw. So we won't be taking additional questions from the public, but thank you for the interest. Councilwoman Vigil Koppler, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to the comment you just made, I want to let Mr. Vigil and anybody who's watching this know that there is a public hearing on this at the city council meeting. So this isn't the only opportunity you will have to speak. And I do hope more people are aware of that it is a public hearing on Wednesday, and that you bring your comments forward. And I'm hoping, because this is an issue important to the whole city, that there will be sufficient time allotted for each public member to make their feelings known. I guess just as a housekeeping kind of matter, I'm assuming we're just considering this substitute bill and that's it. I get, and I'm not saying that we should go back to whatever we had before, which was a ton of stuff and a ton of work and a ton of amendments. But this bill is just fine. But I think the public might want to know that, because there's a whole lot of stuff as attachments to this agenda item. And I don't think we're doing a very good job by letting the public know what the heck it is we're doing here. So my understanding is that from here on forward, we're just doing the substitute bill, and the other stuff is, I guess, out the window. I don't know. I see Councilor Lindell's hand. Do you have a point on my point?
Yeah, a question actually. Procedurally, I think what you just said makes a lot of sense. And I think that with the packet, the way it exists right now, with all the amendments and all the other things in it, I think it is, I think you're correct that it is very confusing. Do we procedurally have a way of eliminating all of those other documents and only working with this substitute resolution? Do we need a motion, or how do you have an opinion on that, Counselor?
Ms. McSherry, can you give that a shot? I think Probably has to do with procedure more than anything else.
Chair Rivera, councilors, we don't have a specific rule about substitutes, but they're essentially a really large amendment. And I think the reason that we're hearing this matter at the committees this week is because the substitute was introduced. So I do think that having this committee's recommendation on the substitute would be helpful going into council on Wednesday night. And then there's not really a way to clear the slate per se, but if the committees have recommendations on the substitute over the next 2 nights, then I would recommend to the mayor that he entertains a motion to either pass or not pass the substitute as an opening motion on Wednesday.
Okay, I'm ready to continue.
Councilwoman Viejo Cobbler.
That's really not my decision to make a recommendation on, but because it has so many tentacles that I don't want to upset anybody. So I'm not going to take this in any order yet because I have just some general comments, and you know, I'm all for doing research and seeing what other cities, even other states do, and Albuquerque seems to be one place we draw from. But Albuquerque isn't the be all end all. And as you know, we are the city different. And I think we should be creative enough to try to resolve our own solution, resolve our own issues. So some of the testimony here tonight is, well, Albuquerque does it and it's just fine and dandy, but I don't think we should be swayed by necessarily what Albuquerque does. And if some of this has come from there, fine, but I don't think defending anything in this resolution should be, you know, Albuquerque does it and that's the way to go. That's just a general comment because some of this can work very well. I do take issue with the idea said here tonight that the council will be involved in monuments and statues, and the decision will be with the governing body. I have to say that I'm not sure the language is strong enough to involve us. And I don't have any amendment for that right now. But I think this governing body was scorned, ignored, discounted in the midnight hour in June of last year, when the mayor took it in his own hands to topple the obelisk and to take away the Don Diego statue. The city council was not involved in that decision. I know I wasn't even informed that was going to happen. I don't know if any of you were, but I really felt, and I still feel, offended by that happening. There's many things that maybe we can be discarded about in terms of decision making, but monuments and statues of our own city is not one of them. And so it's a little bit hard for me to take this resolution at face value that doesn't really give this governing body the authority that we should have to make decisions about our own city and monuments and statues. And so I understand Councilor Garcia's frustration about city council inclusion, because I feel it and I've seen it, and I don't think that we've been appropriately consulted in our role on this whole issue. I do appreciate the work going into this resolution, but it is hard for me to trust. It's hard for me to trust because of what happened last June. And there's nothing that's ever going to excuse that. Nothing. And so we have the power now to include ourselves in something very important in this resolution, where the public feels and expects us to have some authority. And you may recall when that happened in June, even to this day, this city council was held accountable. And we are accountable. And we should make sure that anything we do here forward provides that. So I don't, I know we need to get through this. But I tell you, I don't really believe that, just throwing away all to others, or I shouldn't say throwing away, but just handing the baton to others is always the appropriate thing to do. We need to bring some checkpoints back into what's going on so that we can certainly just be informed, and so that we can have some influence about how this should be, parceled out, and how, where do we go from here? So those are the checkpoints that I think are important here. I'm wondering if we shouldn't learn from what happened to us when we were deliberating on what to do about Midtown. You might recall, and this is regarding surveys, the whole discussion about surveys. We let that train loose early. And, this was the very beginning, the very first phase that later kind of got set aside, where there were invitations to groups to go over to the Genevieve Chavez Center, and they did Post-it notes and all this stuff. And so then all that was compiled, and what we learned was we missed a big segment of population, a big segment. And what we found was the outreach that we did was not targeted to make sure that the people who this affected were told that this was going on and what it was about. Where do you go? Do we have translators? Do we have hearing impaired translators as well? And all that went very wrong. But we were able to use at least some of the data and learn from it. But, since this isn't really tied down, and there's one of my big frustrations is that it doesn't really say how we're going to reach all these people. And the language in here where it says unaffiliated, that bothers me very much, because aren't we really trying to target those affiliated with different groups? I mean, I don't know where we're going to find unaffiliated people. And I don't know if I'm reading that wrong because there's no definitions here, but the other resolution called for representation, and we argued about the size of the committee, but I believe that effort was to be inclusive rather than exclusive. So when we say unaffiliated, I think that's very exclusive. And I'm afraid that that could be the result. And who's going to decide, oh, you can't be in this room because you're affiliated? I mean, is that what, I'm not sure, I don't want to charge that, but that's what I worry about. And I don't know why we just can't say everybody who's interested in this, you're all welcome. That's what I would like to see. I think we can learn from anyone. And so that bothers me. And I don't know yet, I was kind of waiting to see what everybody was going to say. I wanted to hear the responses from the sponsors to see what, maybe something could change my mind. But I hear Midtown in the back of my head, and I hear that we don't want to make that same mistake. And so I'm really in tune to that. And I really believe like anybody who wants to participate in this should, because I would hate for it to be so one-sided that what we get back is not representative of, what people really felt and the real harm that this caused to people who grew up here and who are accustomed to our culture and everything else. We've heard it all, so I don't mean to rehash. I too was concerned about who this project team would be, because we have a great deal of new people in the city. We have some that may not have experience in this, I really don't know if we shouldn't be more direct in how these people that comprise the project team and who they choose shouldn't have some degree of experience. And that's really important. And then you get into the survey thing, and surveys are very scientific documents. I mean, they're so scientific. There are classes on how you put this together, and I've taken one in my master's class. Brian Sanderoff was in my class. I mean, this is very scientific stuff. So when you develop this, it's really got to be good and targeted to be sure you reach the people that need to be reached. And then the question is, who's going to tabulate this? Because that's also very scientific. How is that going to work? And I know that may be too much detail to put in a resolution, but that's why I would feel comfortable with checkpoints along here. And I think that maybe is related to what Councilor Garcia brought up when he said, you know, let's have some people take a look, at least a look-see, and see if, you know, a meeting of the minds that, yeah, this could work. Because I will say, I know there's some surveys the city has put out in the past, and I'm trying to remember what they were, but I got a lot of calls from constituents who got them and thought we were nuts because the survey was just like very elementary and really wasn't getting at what they felt it should have. I don't know that that would be the case here, but I think it's important to have more competent, experienced people involved in this process. And if it means taking some of that $276,000 and hiring somebody who does this and does it well, that might be worth the money. On page 2, line 8, the first word open. Okay, so a number of community dialogue sessions open generally to community members. I do not like that word generally. I don't think that we should have anybody lording over what can be open and what can't. So I'm going to certainly make an amendment to strike generally. I think that sets the wrong message. And again, unaffiliated, same line, unaffiliated. I think we need to do a better job with that word, unaffiliated. I worry that, again, we're not going to get the people that we need to get. Now, on page, same page, starting at line 10 and 11, and I know Councilor Carol Romero Worth, you read this, but that line doesn't make sense. I don't know if we're missing a verb or something's wrong. And reconciliation and to inform decisions. To inform what? About what decisions? That doesn't make any sense. So I think that needs fixing. Not sure about that. I had one of the former mayors call me and suggest, well, if you look at line 13 to 16, it's pretty much saying we are going to have online stuff going on here. And the idea, I think that whole idea should be inversed, where we say if we can have these in person and reach a greater audience, except if we can't. So I think if you change the reverse of this language, that this is going to last a long time. It's going to take a long time. So to kind of put the emphasis on online stuff rather than in person, I think we should put it in person first, unless we can't do it, then it would be online. I don't know, that just, to me, that part of that would seem to me to discourage people who aren't able, they don't have computers. You know, some of these people who are affected by our culture and our everything we do, my culture for one, I mean, some people don't even have internet and they don't have the means to purchase computers and to have that. So we've got to find a way for everybody to be included. And that was really one of the mayor's the former mayor's main points, is people have to be included. And in order to participate, they really have to feel welcomed. And that means without any financial barriers. So I think sometimes psychologically, the way you say things makes all the difference in the world, even if you're saying the same things. Then I heard something tonight about how council can't get involved. And I understand that the city or us individually as counselors, why we might not want to do that. But I tell you, I mean, I want to get involved because this affects me. I mean, I've been a participant in our culture and some of the things that have gone on in this city since childhood. I've been a princesa. I have followed the Fiesta Council and all the stuff that went on. This is back in the 70s, and I still feel very connected and very involved. And it has affected me on a personal level. And if I show up, I don't want to be kicked out. I know how to, make all the disclosures that I possibly would need to make. And this is important to me, and I may just attend, and I just want to give you all full knowledge and just notice that could happen. This is more to me on a personal level, at the point of group discussions and such that are in here, that I feel like I should be able to express my own opinion, being a native here and being a Hispanic and having participated in all these meaningful roles. So that's important to me, and so I just want to give you notice on that. I did have some circling around, the community solutions table and who picks those. That goes back to making sure that people who are in these roles have the experience and the knowledge to do this. It's really important to start right from the very beginning. From down to who conducts the interviews. Will the public see the results of these interviews? How's that going to happen? We need to be real mindful about including the public, whether they're participants in a roundtable or any of these processes that are built herein, that the public still knows what we're doing. And because we're in pandemic and all this stuff, I think we have to work twice as hard to make sure that this happens, or else we will get to the end of this and we will have solved nothing. And that goes back to Councilor Garcia's point about setting goals and objectives. If you don't know where you're going, then you'll end up somewhere else. And all this could just be blowing up in our face if we're not, number one, involved as a governing body to kind of spearhead and make sure everything's on the right direction. And then two, to make sure that when this is all over, we're not still stuck in the same place with monuments that are hidden in somebody's warehouse and something in the middle of the plaza that's nailed on with plywood. We may still have that because we haven't been involved, and I think it's important to do that. Built in here, going back to the governing body, we need to build in checkpoints. We need to weigh in, and somehow it needs to be written in here. The only thing that I don't think I've addressed in my commentary, and maybe there were some questions in there, but I'd rather get all my stuff out on the table, and then I know Councilor Romero Worth has her hand up. But the FIR, the 276,000. This should be non-recurring money, and if an FIR is filled out correctly, it should say recurring or non-recurring. And I understand that finance department has strict rules about FIRs now, and that people filling them out have to say if this money is recurring or non-recurring. I see this as non-recurring money, and I also don't know how 276,000 was arrived at. There's no detail that I could see. Maybe there is. but I didn't see it. So I don't know if anybody here knows the answer to that, but those are pretty much my comments, and hopefully I can work on something to help this along. So I appreciate you all listening to me, and Mr. Chair, that is the end of my comment for now.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Romero Worth, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to read two passages from the resolution, possibly to alleviate some of the concerns. I won't address all of them. On page 4, lines 9 through 11, be it further resolved that the information generated from the processes in this resolution is a first effort and shall be compiled in a format for use and consideration by the governing body to inform its deliberation and evaluation for future process, action, and decisions. So again, I think the resolution speaks very clearly that the authority rests in us, and that we, as the governing body, will be making decisions based on what we hear back from this process we are creating. And then I would also read on page 4,
Can I just ask you about that one? To me, that sounds like that's going to be done after this is all over with. And I understand that that's also good. I like that, but there's nothing in between. And that's where I'm concerned. Because let's see, is there a deadline? Yeah, the end of this year, December 2021. And so are we going to get to December and then we're going to get this report? That's fine and good, but what's going to happen in between? How are we going to be involved in even just what they're doing in between? That was my concern.
Councilor Romero Worth.
Mr. Chair, and I believe that we do need to put something in the resolution that talks about coming back to council, and again, based on the Albuquerque process, and some follow-up meetings that we have had, and I'm just looking for some of the language that had been suggested. Bear with me 1 second. Not finding it quickly, but that we do want that in Albuquerque, they had a website, and they did have reports that came back. And I think that is something we want to have, but it's more in the idea of, we have convened, 10 of these cohorts of community dialogue sessions, or we have 30 people so far who've completed 3 community dialogue sessions and are ready to serve on the community solutions table when we get to that point. It's that kind of information, because we don't want to have a chilling effect on the public dialogue. We want to step back a bit from that. So I hear you, Counselor. I do think we need to possibly put something in here about making sure that we're helping people in the community and the council itself understand what's happening with regard to this process. And just, Mr. Chair, one more piece on this. I'd like to read page 4, lines 14 through 16. Be it further resolved that this is the beginning of an ongoing effort to learn and understand our complex histories and stories, and to promote truth, healing, and reconciliation for a future of peace and justice. Again, I think this is a beginning. What we're doing here is we're creating a process to better understand one another, to get to know each other, and so that we can collectively determine and hear from the public how to move forward based on our shared values. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I wanted, anyone else on the, Councilor Lindell?
Thank you, Chair. I think what Councilor Romero Worth just read, that those are the goals and objectives of this process. I think the process is one in trusting our community, listening to the voices of everyone. I heard Councilor Garcia say that people say to him, you know how we feel. We know how some people feel. I think there's a lot of people we haven't heard from. And I think that there's a lot of people that we haven't heard from that feel like they've been excluded, that we haven't allowed them to be part of, that we've bullied them when they've had a different opinion. We've told them to shut up. I don't mean us. I don't mean this council. But I think it's incumbent upon us that we make sure that people, even with small voices, get heard and respected, and they're not told to shut up. And that's a lot of our work, is to make sure that they have a place to say how they feel too. This is a process of trying to find compassion and kindness. I don't think people are intrinsically mean, but I think they get fearful and lash out. What's the part of the council in this? That's a lot of what I see as part of the council, is to allow this community to tell us how they feel and to be able to tell each other how they feel and to have a reasonable space to do that. I don't think that this process is just about, or even mainly about, monuments and statues. What's the difference between a monument and what's a statue? This is about our community and how we share this space and how we respect each other. And in this process, I hope that people will approach this with an open mind and an open heart. We've heard some very harsh things from people. So I think that that's part of our work as the council. And I think it's also part of our work to trust our community. I appreciate the work on this. I do like this substitute much more than the original, in as much as this seems much more inclusive and listening to our community rather than top-down process. And we have a timeline on this. We may not be done at that timeline. I think it's something we're shooting for. But I also think if people disagree with things that are in this, bring an amendment. Let us all take a look at it. I think everyone here wants the best outcome possible, but I also think that we need to be careful not to politicize this and not to go too far into the weeds, and to trust our community to have a good process and to be respectful and compassionate with each other. So I'm going to support this, Chair. I'm ready to make a motion if we're at that point. Or I see that Councillor Abeda's hand is up, so I'll hold off. Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start with the resolution first and specific items in the resolution, and then my general comments and feelings. First of all, regarding, there's been a lot of talk about page 2 and items lines 6 through 8. And it's my understanding, and one of the reasons I support the resolution is that there will be convening of community dialogue sessions with organizations. And organizations can do that by themselves. And I think that's very important. I think Unión Protectiva should be able to have their own session with their own dialogue session. I think it's important if the Caballeros want to have their own with just their membership and their and the facilitator, they should be able to do that. And so it's my understanding. And if you're not part of an organization and you want to have a session, or there's a group, like for example, the Southwest Santa Fe Advocates, they're a newly formed group and organization. They don't really identify themselves as a neighborhood association, but they may want to participate in this. And I believe that's was the intent behind, well, maybe not they're unaffiliated, they're not an actual organization. So I think the intent here is that we're going to open this up for both possibilities. The next comment I have is, I think that I agree that there should be check-ins, but I think we want to be careful as to how we space them out, because maybe we want to have so much progress made before there is a check-in, but there should be. As far as the timeline, maybe if we're successful, we may need more time because there is so much participation and dialogue and a lot of interest by all these parties. But for now, maybe it's good to leave the December 31st date in there so that we do get going. As far as the budget, $276,000, I received an email. I don't know if the entire council has yet, maybe because I'm the chair of finance, but we do have a breakdown of the 276,000 with a description of the different amounts. And so if we can be sure to get that to all of the council, that would be great. Like I said, I might have gotten it being the chair of finance, and since we have finance tomorrow. So we do have that. I think that when we started with the first resolution, the feedback I got from lots of members of the public was their concern was somehow the committee was going to be stacked with allies of one side or the other. And so I heard that, and I think this eliminates that, so that there isn't that concern about a committee being stacked and then some, like I said, some side getting their way through that. So I agreed, okay, well, then let's remove the whole committee process itself. I think this is a leap of faith. We don't have all the answers, but I don't think there's anything that precludes us from coming back and saying we were wrong, or we need to pivot, or we need to make adjustments to this. But we have to get started. I think gentlemen like Miguel Gabaldon, who has come to meeting after meeting, committee and council, has been waiting patiently. I think there's been members of Unión Protectiva and other groups that have been waiting patiently. It's not perfect, but we have to get started. And I think sometimes part of leadership, what I've learned is sometimes you have to admit you don't have all the answers, and you're not going to be able to figure it all out. And you have to step back and let, in this case, the community step forward and get meeting and give put their best foot forward. As there was comments about Again, we know what, you know what to do. You're an elected official. You know what we want. And I agree with Councilor Lindell. And myself, I've heard from different sides. Some people they want the obelisk put back up. Others don't. My own family, there's disagreements with what to do about statues and monuments, depending on who you speak to. So I think there really does need to be a community dialogue, and I think it has to include all members of the community. As everybody knows, I work with youth, but I think it was Councilwoman Vihil Coppler who brought up a good point that I didn't realize, that there is the older generation that don't feel comfortable on Zoom or doing these things. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So I think there were all good comments tonight. I don't think this resolution is perfect, far from it, but I think that if we just get started, then I think hopefully we can get there. I have faith in our community that we can get there. And so those are my comments for this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the governing body and this committee.
Thank you. Before I entertain a motion, I'd like to give Councilwoman Villarreal an opportunity to speak, make a comment, or ask any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have questions at the moment because I'm going to wait till tomorrow. There were questions and concerns I had about certain sections that my colleagues brought up tonight. I actually have some amendments that may change or at least help clarify some of the language in the resolution. So I'm going to try to get those to Mr. Guillen tonight so that we can start discussing them and then try to figure out what will go forward to the governing body session. I think it's just helpful to know that, I guess what I want to say is that I was not happy with the first resolution. I thought it was divisive and already setting up binaries between different types of groups, and it was definitely top heavy. And I think this is a better start to looking at ways with this substitute resolution that there's a better path forward with it. It's not perfect, but I think there's some ways that we can add, as I said, clarification. And I'll just stop there since this meeting has gone pretty long. So I'll just be moving forward with some resolution or amendments for this particular substitute resolution tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Villarreal. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilor Beta, second by Councilor Lindell. Any discussion? I don't see none. I'll make one final comment. I think Councilor Beta said it as well. I've been on the council for 9 years. I have never seen the perfect resolution come out. And, you know, this one may have some holes in it, may have some questions, even after all the amendments are accepted and we put a finished product out, there'll still be something that we question or we have concern about, or we have some ideas that maybe it's not going to work so well. But we do the best that we can. We put our best foot forward. We hope for best results, and then we make adjustments as we need to. We still see ourselves doing that with short-term rental. That has been a process for many years, and this might be a process for 6 months. It might be a process for a year, maybe a year and a half, but we'll do our best to figure it out. And even at the end, it might not be the perfect product, but hopefully it's something good that we can all live with. So just wanted to make that comment. With that, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz?
Councilor Garcia,
I'm going to abstain.
Councilor Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Vihil Coppler.
I want to see the FIR in the amendments, so until then I want to abstain.
And Chairman Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. With that, we're on to matters from staff. Do we have anything, Ms. Wheeler?
Thank you, Chairman. Public Works doesn't have any matters from staff tonight.
Thank you. Matters from the committee.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Vihil Coppler.
Thank you. You know, when we were meeting live and we had two separate committees, Public Works and Utilities, one of the things I asked for at each meeting was an update on what safety measures have happened, you know, for the month. You might recall that. And so we would get just an update if there was any training or any specific matters with regard to safety. And so since we've been meeting virtually, we really haven't had any emphasis on safety anymore. And so for the next meeting, if Mr. Jones and Ms. Wheeler could give us an update on what's occurring in their respective departments regarding safety and employee welfare and well-being, I would appreciate that to get back on track with that. And then the other, I'd like an update from Ms. Wheeler, if she can provide it, with what the hiring progress is with regard to hiring in the engineer vacancies.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Vihil Coppler. We have interviewed for John Romero's position, the engineering division director, and we did select a candidate. We had two good candidates and one we think a really excellent candidate, and so we haven't made the offer, but it should happen this week. So that's exciting. We advertised the traffic engineer position for the 5th time in 2 years and got no qualified applicants. So I am reviewing all the applicants. We had already increased the grade and the pay for the position before we advertised it. We updated the job description to discuss multimodal traffic engineering. So we were really, we really thought we had it better positioned to have a better result. But we'll be taking a look at the fact that we didn't get any qualified applicants and try to decide what our next move is on that for the traffic engineer. In the meantime, we do have Wilson and Company under contract providing traffic engineering services related to design review for new developments so that the land use process can continue, because that's a really important piece. So they are filling that gap so that developers can continue to bring new development to Santa Fe. And then the third, well, there's actually 2 more vacancies in engineering. There's a lot of gaps. There was Sarah Anderson's, if you remember her, in that position, because if we can get PEs in the other 2 positions, I'm considering removing the PE requirement from that position, which would make some internal candidates highly qualified for it. And I think that would be a great career ladder opportunity. And they're doing a really good job on managing them directly, and I can see their growth and development even just with the expanded responsibilities they have now. Let's see. Oh, and then there's one more. Lab Luceto's position is vacant, and we're also holding on that. Marie Martinez in Streets is picking up some of that, and we have Jeremy Martinez in engineering as a project administrator, and he's picking up those responsibilities right now. So we're really trying to shape this thoughtfully, and bringing in the engineering division director will be a huge win. He actually, if this particular candidate accepts our offer, he's not a traffic engineer, but he has done a lot of very large capital development projects that include roads, intersections, pedestrian infrastructure, bicycle ped, as well as facilities. And so I think he'll bring you a great broad range of experience and could be with us for some time. He's a mid-career professional.
So how many vacancies have you had? A lot?
Well, as I said, there's There's John Romero's position. There's the traffic engineer has been vacant for years. Ever since I've been here, we've been trying to fill it and never had a qualified applicant. Sarah Anderson's position and Lad Lucetto's position. So 4 vacancies, and they're kind of right in a line in engineering. So the consultant's really important, and the staff is really stepping up to manage our projects. We're making great progress on Guadalupe Street, on Harrison Road, and all of our other road capital projects. I manage them directly and meet with them weekly.
And so the span of time that those vacancies have occurred is what, like 4 months, maybe?
Actually, no, well, John Romero left on October 2nd. Sarah Anderson left about almost a year before that. Lad Lucetto retired, and he left about 6 months ago. And as I said, the traffic engineer hasn't been filled since I've been here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the committee? Matters from the chair. So I'd like to, again, Shannon and Miss Wheeler, so we can have some safety training updates that have been done at each of your areas. That would be great. And then hopefully, Miss Wheeler, you'll let us know about the hopefully filling of a engineer vacancy at our next meeting. That would be great. I'd also like to thank everyone for the discussion tonight. I know our meetings don't typically go this long, but I think it's important. I think we had great discussion. I'd like to thank the mayor, Councilor Romero-Worth, Councilor Villarreal for joining us. And then the rest of our staff as we begin a new year. Just, echo, I hope what I try to say all the time to Joe and Christine and Miss Diaz and Miss Wheeler, Mr. Jones and all your staff. So I am so honored and blessed to chair this committee because I think we deal with some of the smartest and best people in city government. Not to say that we don't have great people everywhere, but we do have some bright people in water and engineering and public works, and it's just an honor. So thank you for a great 2020, and I look forward to a great 2021. And if I left anybody out, Joe Beta, we seem to leave you out. I hope I said your name, but I appreciate you tremendously as well. With that, our next meeting is Monday, January 25th, 2021. And we'll see you all Wednesday night. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.